A father was laughing with his little boy on a quiet Saturday morning when his body suddenly gave out. His heart stopped, and he fell right in front of his son. What the child did next was so astonishing that neighbors, doctors, and even strangers online would one day say it was nothing short of a miracle. Stay with us until the end, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. By day, the world barely noticed Jordan Wells. At night, though, when skyscrapers in Brookstone emptied and office lights flicked off, he went in with his cart and mop. Marble lobbies, fingerprinted elevators, endless hallways. He polished them all while most of the city slept. He was invisible to the suits who came back each morning to shine. But there was one detail that set Jordan apart from the rest. Every night, he pushed that cart with an 18-month-old boy at his side. That boy was Ezra Wells, Jordan's son. Ezra never should have been in those buildings, tucked under reception desks and swaddled on conference couches. But Jordan had no one else. His wife, Mariah, had died the very night Ezra was born. No relatives close enough to step in. No babysitter he could afford. Daycare cost more than he earned scrubbing offices. So the choice was harsh but simple. Work with Ezra beside him or lose everything. Jordan became a one-man circus. He folded diapers next to bottles of bleach, heated formula in the same microwaves that executives used to warm their catered meals. When floors gleamed under his mop, Ezra's blanket was spread out just a few feet away. It was exhausting, almost unthinkable. Yet he endured because love left him no other option. Back home, their world was bare. A peeling one-bedroom with a draft through the windows. The crib was a plastic laundry basket lined with towels. Baths were taken in a wide storage bin because the tub leaked. But Ezra never went without affection. After every shift, no matter how drained he was, Jordan always carved out a moment to laugh with him, to hold him close, and to whisper a promise into the dark. One day, you'll have better than this. One day, I'll make it happen. It wasn't a bedtime comfort. It was a vow carved out of grief and love. For Jordan, Saturdays were the only time that still felt like a gift. No lobby to wax, no conference tables to polish. Just a slow morning in their tiny apartment, Ezra tumbling around the floor while laughter filled the room. Those hours were precious. An island of peace in a life that felt like constant survival. But peace is fragile, and that morning, it shattered with the ring of a phone. Jordan lifted the receiver with one hand, balancing Ezra in the other. The caller ID made his stomach twist. He recognized the number instantly. On the other end, a clipped voice said his name like it was an inconvenience. Mr. Wells, we've received further complaints. Children are not allowed on site. We're terminating your contract. Jordan's heart seized before his chest ever did. He stood without thinking, clutching Ezra tighter. Please, you can't. I've had no choice. I can't pay for daycare. I've done everything I can. It's nothing personal, the voice interrupted. But the decision is final, effective immediately. Then silence. Jordan lowered the phone slowly, as if moving carefully might change the words he just heard. But nothing changed. He was out, jobless, again. And this time, the last fragile rope holding his world together had snapped. He looked down at Ezra. His son's bright eyes blinked up at him, smiling, hands sticky from play. Ezra babbled happily, holding up his toy like nothing in the world had gone wrong. But for Jordan, everything had. His pulse thundered. His lungs strained to pull air. That was when the real danger began. A crushing weight gripped his chest, sharp and merciless. His left arm prickled, then burned. Sweat trickled down his skin. He tried to stay upright, but the room tilted violently. Ezra stretched the toy toward him again and said the one word Jordan lived for, Dada. Jordan reached for him, but his hand trembled. No sound came. His legs buckled. He stumbled, then crumpled hard against the floor. The toy clattered away. The room went still. Ezra froze, startled by the sound of his father's fall. Jordan lay motionless, an outstretched hand, a pale face, a chest barely lifting. The boy didn't understand what had happened. But even at that age, he knew something was terribly wrong. Ezra crawled over on shaky hands and knees. He patted his father's cheek, once, then harder, waiting for him to wake up. Nothing. His bottom lip trembled. He whimpered softly, then sat back in stunned silence. The apartment had never felt this quiet. For a few seconds, the little boy just stared at the man who always got back up. But when Jordan didn't move, something changed inside him. Ezra turned toward the window. the one above the couch, where they spent mornings watching cars and afternoons bathing in sunlight. He didn't know why, but he knew he needed to reach it. He crawled, struggled, then began the climb. Tiny fingers gripped the cushion. Small legs wobbled as he pushed himself up. Step by step, pull by pull, he rose until he was standing, barely steady, but determined. Then he lifted his hands and began to slam them against the glass. Once, twice, louder, faster. His little palms smacked the pane with all the strength in his body. His mouth opened, but no clear words came, just urgent, breathless sound. It wasn't noise, it was instinct. It was his only way of calling for help. On the street outside, Saturday morning unfolded quietly. Elena Park, Jordan's next-door neighbor, was watering her plants the way she always did, moving slowly between rose bushes, letting the calm soak in. The neighborhood was still, birdsong faint in the background. Then she heard it. A strange, insistent thudding. Not from her porch, not from the street. She paused, tilted her head, and listened. The sound came again, rhythmic, desperate. She turned and looked up. Her breath caught. In the window of the apartment next door stood a baby, tiny, unsteady, pounding his hands against the glass again and again. His face was flushed, his mouth open in a silent cry that didn't carry outside. Behind him, the room was dim. No sign of movement, no adult in sight. Elena's pulse spiked. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. She dropped the watering can right there on the sidewalk and rushed across the yard. Her fist hammered the front door. "Hello? Can you hear me? Is everything all right?" No response. She pounded harder, voice rising. "Sir, are you in there? Is the baby okay?" Still nothing. Her eyes flicked back to the window. The child was still there, but now slower, weaker. His hands dragged tiredly against the glass, his forehead pressed to the pane, eyes wide and wet. Elena didn't hesitate. She sprinted around the building, straight to the back door. The knob turned easily, unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of baby powder and something cold. Too quiet. Her chest tightened as her eyes adjusted to the dim room. And then she saw him. A man, motionless on the floor. One arm stretched awkwardly toward an empty bottle, his skin pale, his chest rising in shallow, fragile breaths. Elena gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God. She dropped to her knees beside him, shaking fingers searching his neck. A pulse, faint but there. Relief collided with panic. She fumbled for her phone and dialed. 911, please, you have to send someone. I think he's had a heart attack. He's not responding. There's a baby here, please hurry. As she gave the address, she glanced sideways. The baby had crawled back beside his father, crouched silently, eyes fixed on the man lying so still. In his tiny hand, he clutched something bent and smudged, a work ID badge with Jordan's photo on it, gripped like it was treasure. Her voice wavered as she whispered, more to herself than to him. You were trying to tell someone. She scooped the boy into her arms. He didn't resist. He just looked at her with wide, solemn eyes, as if waiting to know if she had understood at last. She pressed him close, her voice soft but firm. It's all right now. I see you. You did so well. The sirens weren't there yet, but help was already in the room. Red and blue lights soon flooded the quiet street. Sirens wailed as two paramedics rushed inside, carrying their cases. Elena stepped back quickly, still holding Ezra close as they dropped to the floor beside Jordan. One pressed fingers to his neck, pulse weak. The other checked his airway, eyes sharp. He's breathing, but shallow. Let's move. Now. Oxygen mask, defibrillator pads. Quick clipped orders exchanged with calm urgency. They worked in rhythm, every second precious. Within moments, Jordan was lifted onto a stretcher, wires trailing, his face pale but alive. Ezra watched everything from Elena's arms, silent, wide-eyed, gripping her blouse in his tiny fists. He didn't cry. He just stared as his father's body disappeared out the door into flashing lights. Elena followed close behind, her heartbeat still hammering. Hours later, fluorescent lights hummed quietly in the hospital ward. Machines beeped steady. Monitors glowed. When Jordan's eyes finally flickered open, confusion clouded his face. He tried to push himself up, but the weight in his chest and the sharp ache stopped him cold. A nurse stepped in quickly, hand gentle on his arm. Don't move yet. You're at Brookstone General. You suffered a heart attack, but you're stable now. Jordan's voice cracked, thin and broken. "Where's my son?" The nurse's expression softened. "He's safe. Your neighbor brought him in. He hasn't left your side." As if on cue, the door opened. Elena walked in slowly. Ezra nestled against her shoulder. Jordan's breath caught in his throat. His boy looked whole, untouched by the chaos, yet somehow older, as if the morning had carved years into his small frame. Elena came closer, lowering her voice. "He's the reason you're here. I only came because I saw him at the window. If he hadn't been banging, I never would have known." Jordan blinked hard as tears blurred his vision. He stretched out a trembling hand. Ezra reached back, his tiny palm pressing against his father's chest, right where the pain still throbbed. Jordan's voice broke into a whisper. "You saved me, Ezra. You really did." And in that room, beneath the sterile lights, a simple truth settled into everyone present. The smallest hands had carried out the largest rescue. That night, Elena stayed long after visiting hours had ended. She walked Ezra up and down the hall when he grew restless, humming softly until his little body sagged with sleep. Nurses passed and paused, watching the picture of the boy curled against her shoulder, and the man fighting for another chance to live. By morning, the story had already begun to ripple through the hospital. Not about heart monitors or vitals, but about a baby who had refused to stay silent when his father fell. By the second day of Jordan's recovery, the nurses weren't just talking about his condition, they were whispering about his son. The paramedics who had carried Jordan in had shared the detail first. They'd found a man unconscious, on the floor, and a baby in the window, hands red from pounding against the glass. A nurse repeated it during her lunch break. Another snapped a discreet photo in the ward, a boy asleep on his father's chest, still clutching that bent ID badge like a holy relic. That image found its way online. No filters, no names, just a caption that said everything in 5 words. This baby saved his father. The internet didn't scroll past. It stopped. Within hours, the story caught fire. Local news ran with it first. Toddler's instinct brings help during father's heart attack. By the next morning, national headlines followed. 18-month-old saves father with window plea. People couldn't stop talking about how a child who couldn't even form sentences had summoned the world with nothing but his fists against the glass. Donations began pouring in. Groceries, diapers, formula stacked outside the hospital door. Letters arrived too, handwritten notes from strangers saying things like, "Your son reminded me there's still hope in the world." One company in Brookstone, moved by the story, offered Jordan a job with flexible hours and built-in childcare support. But none of it meant more than the moment Jordan held Ezra close in the hospital bed and whispered, "You didn't just save me, son. You gave me back my life." And for the first time since Mariah's death, he meant it with no shadow of doubt. The headlines eventually faded, as they always do. The internet moved on. But Jordan didn't. He couldn't forget the sight of his son's little palms striking glass. The soundless cry that somehow pierced through walls and distance. Because what Ezra had done was more than a story. It was survival. It was love refusing to be silent. Jordan stayed in the hospital for 3 more days, his chest still aching as monitors tracked every beat. The doctors were clear. Another collapse like that might be his last. The warning gnawed at him, but what haunted him most was the thought of Ezra alone. That morning, slamming his tiny fists against the glass, hoping someone would hear. Through it all, Elena remained. She came each dawn with fresh clothes for Ezra, cradled him through restless hours, and moved with a gentleness that no one expected from a neighbor. Nurses noticed. Even Jordan noticed. She was filling a space that had been hollow for far too long. One evening, as Ezra dozed in her arms, Jordan asked the question pressing at him, "Why are you doing this?" Elena kept her eyes on the child, her voice low. "I lost my husband in a car accident 4 years ago. I was 5 months pregnant then. It was a boy. I lost him too." She hesitated, swallowing hard. "Since then, my mornings have been empty. But when I saw Ezra at that window, I didn't think. I just ran. Something in me said I couldn't lose him too." Jordan had no words, only a heavy silence. And in that silence, Ezra stirred, his little hand brushing Elena's cheek. Sleepily, he whispered a single word, "Mama." The room stilled. Elena froze, eyes filling with tears. Jordan looked at her but didn't correct the child. Neither of them did. because in that moment, one word built a bridge across all their grief. By the time Jordan was discharged, the story outside the hospital had taken on a life of its own. People called Ezra the baby who refused to stay silent, the boy who had summoned help when no one else could. But for Jordan and Elena, the real story was quieter. It was about a second chance, at family, at love, and at building something that would outlast headlines. And when Elena finally said, "There are other parents out there like you, working nights with nowhere to turn, maybe we can change that," Jordan knew she was right. Out of survival, out of loss, and out of a baby's fists on a window, something new was about to begin. They didn't want Ezra's story to live only as a viral post. They wanted it to become something lasting, something that would protect other children and parents who face the same long nights. Together, they put their savings and the donations from strangers to use. What began as an almost unthinkable tragedy became the seed for a new beginning. They called it Ezra's Beacon, a night care center built for parents who worked shifts when the rest of the world slept. Bus drivers, janitors, hospital staff, factory workers, people who kept the city running but had nowhere to leave their children safely. The building was modest, painted in warm yellow light, furnished with donated toys and second-hand cribs. But when families walked through the door, they didn't find pity. They found dignity. They found a place where their children could sleep safely while they worked to survive. On opening night, Jordan walked slowly through the dim hallways, turning off lights room by room. He paused at the nursery, where toddlers slept soundly in their small sleeping bags. In the corner, Ezra was curled against Elena, their hands entwined. Jordan whispered the vow he had once spoken over a laundry basket crib. One day, things will be better. Now, they were. 2 years later, families gathered in the courtyard behind Ezra's Beacon for a simple wedding. Jordan and Elena stood together, not in a grand hall, but surrounded by the very people whose lives had been touched by their center. Ezra, now 3, stood proudly at the center, a small boy who had once been too young to speak but had already changed the course of countless lives. Jordan often returned to the nursery window late at night, watching weary parents drop off their children after long shifts. Some arrived in uniforms, others in tears. And when they walked back out lighter than they had come in, he smiled, because he remembered what it felt like to be alone, and he remembered the sound of tiny fists on glass, refusing to let love slip away. He looked at Elena and Ezra, his unexpected family, and whispered, "Not as a promise, this time, but as a truth already lived. You didn't just save my life, Ezra. You gave me a reason to live it. Not every hero stands tall. Sometimes the greatest courage comes from hands so small they can barely grip a toy. And sometimes the loudest cry for help isn't a word at all. It's the sound of a child refusing to give up until someone finally comes." If this story touched you, share in the comments the moment that stayed with you most. Pass this video to someone who could use a reminder that love, even from the smallest among us, has the power to change everything. And don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss another story that might inspire you to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.